want to start off by just saying how I discovered Finding Courage. A contact at Swoop Films reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in reviewing the film. And so I watched it. And then I read the further in the email afterwards that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the release was kind of in question. And it's hard for me as a critic to write about something and put it out to people without, having some way for them to actually go see it, especially a movie that I'm excited about like this. So I really wanted to talk to you and at least kind of raise awareness about the project so that when it does come out, people will be encouraged to check it out. So I wanted to start off by talking about what the experience has been like having to pivot from a film that was, I assume, on the verge of being released to ironically being temporarily scuttled by a virus that may have come from a Chinese lab.
It's just crazy. I mean, everyone's world has just been turned upside down, right? And it's been no different for us in that sense. Like, we were working with a broadcaster to get this movie out nationwide in the US, and then we wanted to tie our distribution around that. And that broadcaster does a lot of news. So once the pandemic hit, I mean, you like, everyone saw there's just nothing else on the news, and they told us themselves, we cannot report anything else. This is even though people want to know about China now, they're not. We've only just head out of this stage of news related to the coronavirus. So we spent the last few months, pivoting, as you said. We moved pretty quickly. It's, I guess, as independent filmmakers, we have to be really flexible because which way do you go? If you get a broadcast option, you want to look at that seriously, but then that may mean that you miss going to some festivals, which may affect the not getting so much recognition for the film, which is kind of important too for people to see, has this film won any awards? Has it been screened at any festivals? But then the broadcast, where everything got put on hold because of the news, and then the film festivals were being put on hold because no one can sit in theaters next to each other. So that's been a real challenge for us. And so we just thought, this is the type of movie where we just felt we can't just wait. We could put it off until next year and wait for the next film festival cycle, wait for the broadcasters. But as you've seen in the movie, the story that we're telling is life and death for a lot of people. And it is happening in China right now. It also connects to us here in the US. So it's very topical. And we just felt if we put this distribution and release on hold, then we're not doing any favors to the people that are in the story. So we decided to take it into our own hands and start contacting people like you and saying, please, can you take a look at this film? Can you let people know about it, and also be honest, tell us what you think, because that way the audience, we can go direct to the public and let audiences see for themselves, okay, do I want to watch this movie or not? And do I have to rely on getting it through, a big network or a big studio? Maybe people are going to be more open to seeing that movies through different channels now, and we're really hoping that that's the case. We're finding that's the case, and we're still fingers crossed that we're going to be releasing in a couple months. We're really hoping for that.
So in a couple months, are you saying that might be some kind of a theatrical thing, or going on demand online, or what's the most viable route at this point, you think?
Well, we're going to be screening at a festival at the end of this month. That's a rare kind of thing, right? Because most of the festivals are not running, or they've been postponed indefinitely. So I don't know how they're going to do it. So we're going to see what that's going to look like. Theatrical, we really, it's a shame because we really made the movie for the big screen. We really put a lot of effort into some big visuals there. We may not be able to do a theatrical run, and we're going to live with that. So if we need to, we'll do as many festivals as we can this year. But we'd really like to release this movie before the election in November, because people are caring about China now. Both parties, whatever sphere you think in politically, doesn't matter. You can watch this movie, and this is going to help you make some decisions, because you're not relying on other media. You're getting firsthand stories here from people on the ground in China, and people connected to those people here in the US. So I think this can help people pivot on that perspective too. So we really want to get it out before the election, and that would mean online streaming. So we're hoping we can partner with some online streaming platform and get something going there.
Yeah, it's one thing I was thinking about, particularly, and I don't want to talk too much about what's in the movie because I want people to experience it, but there is a great some rally footage at Capitol Hill towards the end, and you've got a lot of high-profile speakers there. I kept thinking about how much I don't know what you think of the president of the United States, Donald Trump, of course, we're talking about. But for years, he has been kind of ringing the alarm bells on China, mostly in terms of trade. I haven't looked into his comments to see if he's talking about human rights violations. I don't know if he cares or is aware of them. But I just wonder, is that a weird place to be right now, where you've got the president, who's a very divisive figure, who's been talking about China in this very negative way and been called a racist and everything else. But now we're finding with what's going on in Hong Kong, with COVID-19, with Falun Gong and the Uyghur Muslim situation, it doesn't look good. And he almost looks prescient. I don't know how do you feel about that as a filmmaker? Does that create any conflict in you?
It makes... As a filmmaker, I'm really trying not to put my political perspective into the movie, because I really want it to ring out as just, here's a story from this family. What do you think about it? Wherever you sit on the political spectrum, wherever you sit, I think you can watch this movie and get something out of it. In terms of how that rings with the president now, because he is talking about China, it helps, absolutely helps, because for the issue, as you can see at the rally there in the movie, there's people on both sides of the both parties are there, people from a whole range of different backgrounds and organizations. They're coming forward and they're supporting this issue. So we really felt that was great that we had access to that. We didn't choose those people. They were there and we just filmed them. So the whole movie was really like that. We're really trying to just document the story. And the fact that now the political situation is opening up, where people are willing to look at the dark side of China where they haven't been in the past, I think that's a great thing, regardless of what you think about the president of the United States. I think it is great that whoever is calling out China on these human rights abuses, it's great, and it needs to come from all sides, not just from any one person here or there. So I think it's really important, and I hope the situation now with the interest in China is really going to work in our favor, and that comes through in the film, that this is not a partisan movie. This is really something for whatever your take is on the president or on China or communism, whatever. You can take it and just take this as a family story and come to your own conclusions. That's what I hope.
Yeah, and it's the one of the weird things for me is watching it. There is a singular point of view, and I know you didn't inject politics into it. That'd be the wrong word, but it's hard to imagine an opposing point of view to what you're presenting in the documentary. You're talking about, the CCP cracking down on a religious practice for the last, 20 plus years, Falun Gong, which kind of swept the nation with feelings of positivity and almost spirituality, which, according to what I learned in your film, the communist government wanted to crack down on because they didn't appreciate it. So they started imprisoning people and disappearing folks, and some really horrific torture situations. I don't know how anyone stands up and defends that, but have you encountered anyone either in doing research for the film, shooting the film, or just in sort of regular life, who has a position to say, yeah, this is defensible? Because otherwise, I'm just wondering why the wider global world is not outraged. We've got cities on fire in America right now for completely different issues, but I feel like this is almost like a World War II situation, complete with concentration camps and horrible torture devices. What is up with that, do you think?
Oh, it's just crazy when you get into it. And yeah, I really had to go through everything. Everything in this movie, I had to back it up because it is such a sensitive topic. You talk about China, you've got the Chinese regime, such a powerful totalitarian government, so oppressive, and they're able just to mobilize people in the front, behind. We really had to be so careful with the research for this movie because it's become a very polarized topic. I mean, we tackled this issue of the Falun Gong spiritual movement, which in China, it is taboo. And so anyone dealing with the Chinese regime, taboo, you cannot talk about it. So for us to come in and talk about it, it's easy to kind of come in and say, we're going to be for the victims and we're going to tell the victim's story. We really didn't want to do that in a sense that it would make people uncomfortable, people who are doing business with the regime, who are the ones that are keeping their mouths shut, that know this is going on, but they're turning a blind eye, or perhaps they really buy the propaganda. So I really had to watch literally hours of Chinese propaganda, and I had to read, seriously, I've got books this thick of the Chinese propaganda speeches from the official speeches that have been published. Just so much research we had to do to really make sure that what is said in this movie is true, because and is justified. So if the Chinese Communist Party says this word about the group, can I justify why I don't want to use that word, and what's right, what's wrong. And it was a really tough situation because there are a lot of people out there who are bought out with China. China's using their economics to say, we're giving you money, we're giving you business, we're giving you power to an extent. You keep your mouth shut. You do not talk about this issue. And so for them to even look at a film like this, I really hope they do. It poses a moral question for them about, like, okay, yeah, this is like World War II. And when the people started to speak about what was going on in concentration camps in Nazi Germany, there was people here that didn't want to know about it. And it's not that they couldn't believe it. It was just that it was too horrific. Yeah. And we tried not to put too much torture in this movie because it's got to be something that palatable, and I hope that comes through. But we did show, there was one scene where we did show some of the victims after their torture, and it does look like World War II, and that's the reality. So we just felt we really got to show the reality. We can't whitewash this, and but it required a lot of research to feel that justified in saying every statement in the movie, because we have to be able to back that up, and I believe we can.
Now, from what I understand, I was reading your bio, and you were actually imprisoned due to human rights activism about 20 years ago. Can you tell me a bit about that and what your experience, how that might parallel what you saw in terms of the footage and the stories you heard from the camps that are in place today?
It's really interesting because I was in the same basement prison cell at the Tiananmen Square police station that Yifei Wang, our main character, was in. And I only realized that when we started doing these in-depth interviews, and then she described where she was taken after she was arrested on Tiananmen Square for holding a banner. And the same thing happened to me. And I'm a Caucasian. I was like 20 years old at the time. And it was an experience because I was very naive. I really didn't know what was going to happen to me. Would the regime, what are they going to do? I really don't know. I didn't know at the time. I look back on it and yeah, I should have known they were going to arrest me. But I really didn't think they were going to kill me. So let's put it that way. So I knew I was going to survive. And whereas a Chinese citizen possibly will not. But I was in the same prison cell as her. I could describe what she described to me, the tiles on the floor, the tiles all the way up the walls, the hole in the ground with a drain. They could do anything in there and just wash it all clean, and it's all just going to go down the hole. And I could just see that. And so it was a large prison cell where there was about 35 of us who were imprisoned at the same time. And we were squashed into this cell, and then we were interrogated individually for hours on end. And when you just see it firsthand, it does shake you up, because they said to me, "You are paid by the CIA, and we're going to prove it." And I'm thinking, okay, I've got a good job back home. this is my own money. I can prove all of that. But they were absolutely convinced I was paid by the CIA, a 20-year-old naive girl. Yeah, right. Anyway, but they were so convinced about that. And they were so convinced by the Chinese propaganda. And I'd only read about it prior to that. And but just seeing it, it was really eye-opening. And my family also, my grandparents and great-grandparents, they escaped the former Russia when the Reds took over. And the stories that I've heard from them about how they survived, they were lucky to survive, has sort of stuck with me. And then seeing it for myself in China was really an experience. And my husband, he also escaped from the former Czechoslovakia. The family had to escape to be able to survive. And their stories have really inspired me because they've stuck to their values instead of giving up their life for the regime. And they decided to put family first, put safety and personal liberties first. And they lost a lot. They gave up a lot for that. But they've made it back. They're good people, and they've made their homes in new countries and found freedom. So this story of Yifei Wang really kind of rings true for me. There's a lot of parallels for me with my family in a lot of ways, and certainly being in the same prison cell as her. That was something when we figured that out. Wow.
Now, I'm curious. Going through what you did, how long were you imprisoned?
23 hours, because if it hit 24 hours, then the embassy would have had to release me. Because so there's regulations for each country as to how long they're allowed to hold you before the embassy gets involved. So up until 24 hours after that, the embassy would have had to get involved. And they obviously wanted to avoid that because I had done nothing illegal. But in their minds, the law doesn't really count as such. So they held me anyway. But they deported me after 23 hours. Mind you, 23 hours with no food, 23 hours not being able to use the bathroom without having the stall door open and having a row of prison guards and police staring at you. I'm like, zero privacy. This is China under the communist regime. And they're staring at me, expecting me to sit down on the toilet and I'm thinking, no, I can't do this. and they brought out the propaganda. They brought out restaurant food, and they said, here, we're gonna feed you. Great. I was hungry, and bottled water, and I'm like, great. And then they brought out cameras, media cameras, and they said, okay, eat. And I said, no cameras. And they said, no cameras, no food. So they left with the food and we didn't eat. That's how it goes.
Because what I was kind of getting at was going through something like that. I imagine, especially being 20 years old, sort of being a young activist, you can go either way, right? You can be shaken to your core and be like, I just want to go back to my normal job. This is scary. This is real world stuff. Or you can go the other way, which is to devote your life to telling stories and being an activist and trying to, keep standing up for human rights. Was there a conflict there, or did you come out of being deported back as just sort of the affirmation that you were doing what was right and you have to keep going?
I did have the affirmation that I think that was a real turning point for me after I saw the propaganda and how insidious it is, and how these people and what they were doing to me, and I'm thinking, wow, it's if I don't take on board this experience, then I'm really, how do I do justice to my ancestors? The stuff that they did, the sacrifices they made to protect their families in the future. They could have had options. They could have stayed under the regime. They could have given up their values and their principles, but they didn't. So I really had to think hard about that. And and then since then I've had a family, and I've got to think about my kids, and am I putting them at risk by saying things that this massive regime doesn't want people to talk about? But then what I found is actually the louder you are, the less likely they're going to do anything, because the main thing, the one thing that they're really afraid of is public condemnation. They really go to all lengths to stop that. And so I really felt the quieter I am, the worse it's going to be. And I actually felt compelled that I really had to make an effort to speak. And so from then I started learning more storytelling techniques, more how to do this, how to really take this on board and tell stories that have a lot of meaning to me. And I hope that other people find meaning in them too. I think that can be really important.
What, in terms of talking about Yifei's story and Leo, her brother, which that was a big revelation. I think it came in about halfway through the movie where he really enters the picture, and we get to know him and what he went through. Especially he was imprisoned for over 10 years for printing Falun Gong flyers, which is, I think, bonkers to a lot of people in the United States and the Western world. But was it difficult to get him to open up, and all of your subjects, down to the former members of the CCP who came on camera to talk about their experiences? Was that a challenge? Did they come forth, or was it like you found one person who then found a network of people that they could trust them and then they could trust you?
It was a combination. Yifei, being a journalist herself, she had already been tracking down people who were connected to her brother and her sister's case to try and stay on top of this. She's really a real force on trying to protect her family. But when it came, and we found a number of people ourselves too. So she helped bring us, connected us to different people in the story. But many of all of the former regime officials, most of them we found ourselves, and some of the witnesses to Yifei's sister story. But yeah, the subjects themselves, it's really challenging because they've grown up in a different system, so they have a lot of self-protection on what they can say and can't say. One of the regime officials explained it to me, and he said, "Look, I've come to America and I see the politicians getting up there and speaking without a speech." And he used to write speeches for politicians in China. And he said, that's just unheard of. Because in China, if you've got a speech or a script, you're great, you're good. But if you don't have that, he said, you're just going to be standing there going, because if you make a mistake politically, you are dead. Your family's dead. You're out of the water, and your livelihood's cut off. You cannot afford to make those mistakes, especially if you're saying something publicly. So it's really hard working with people like that, because so many of them are afraid to. They just don't have this concept of like, hey, just relax and tell me like I'm your friend. Even that they still have this concept of like anyone could turn me in. Anyone could come against me. So building rapport, like in any documentary, you got to build rapport with the subjects, and we were able to do that with Yifei and get the trust of the family. That took time, but it was very important, and I think we're able to do that. And it took time. At the beginning, she didn't even want to speak. She was too afraid she said, you can show my picture and you can follow me doing things, but I don't want to talk. Eventually she agreed to speak, and then she was really glad that we ended up having the English voice for her, so that it gave her that more confidence that people would understand her story in this world outside of there. But it's really hard for them. It's really hard, and that's why I think as challenging as it is dealing with foreign language subjects in a movie, I kind of felt responsible. The more I got to know these characters, the more I felt that I've got to help tell their story, because on their own, if they were to speak out, it's really hard for people to understand what they've been through and why they speak the way they do. So we really had to process that and then present it in a way that Westerners can say, oh, I get it. Whereas if they just told their story straight out, you might be thinking, I just don't get it. So it was really challenging. Yeah, it was really challenging.
Another thing I was thinking about that has really come into sharper focus this week with the events that are happening here in the States is there's talk about the destruction of capitalism and the systems that, basically are the foundations of our country, right or wrong, the institutional racism and all of that stuff. But there really does seem to be an anti-capitalist bent of burning down buildings and talking about replacing structures, not really sure with what, but, there's talk about socialism and communism, almost as these kind of theoretical ideas that maybe we could try and see how it works out because it's never really been tried before. As someone who's, has a very personal relationship with actual Chinese countries, I'm not implying you're a communist, but you know what I'm saying. How do you read that? What the headlines and what you're seeing on the news?
Well, I have my opinion, and I'll tell you my opinion. Communists have a really very effective and very well documented approach of hijacking organizations, of hijacking protests and making them do what they want. They give those groups and their organizations funding. They support them to achieve their goals, but ultimately they will step on them to achieve what they want. And blaming capitalism, blaming this, blaming that, all these isms out there. I posted a video on Twitter on the weekend of people cleaning up the streets in Minneapolis. A whole group of people came out and they brought a broom and everyone was cleaning. And I posted and said, "This is the America I know. These are the American people I know." And I said, they don't want socialism to run their country. I made that comment, and that sparked a bit of a debate because a number of people said, "This is socialism. Look at these people working together. This is socialism." And I felt compelled to remind them that people have been helping each other as neighbors and as friends, helping their community as human beings well before any of these isms existed, were invented. This is human behavior. This is good human behavior to help our fellow citizens. So these isms tend to, this whole politicizing things has shifted the way people think. And in China, absolutely. In Russia, absolutely. Once this Marxism, Leninism, communism, they're all of the same blood. Nazism, you trace it back, they're all of the same blood. Human beings are animals. They need to be perfected, and we want to play God. We don't believe in God, so we're going to play God, right? So they play God, and they want to create the superhuman race. And to do that, they have to get rid of people. And this is the saddest thing, is that the people who are saying, we need socialism now, they're not recognizing what socialism is. And these are the people saying, "Hey, that's socialism." I'm like, it's not. And they said, "Prove it to me." And so I send them some articles and things like that. They didn't know those things. We really got to be able to identify socialism. We got to be able to identify communism. Socialism is the preparation for communism. There's no there's this one, that one. There is no. China is not technically a communist country. They say themselves they are a socialist country heading toward the goal of communism. So they happen to be run by the Chinese Communist Party, but they are not a true communist state, as in they haven't reached the communist utopia. That's never going to happen because communism requires killing. And they kill the people who help them get into power. And that's what will happen to these groups, these peaceful protesters who are being hijacked then by terrorists. Those terrorists, they're all at risk at just being slammed in the future by the communists that are, they don't care what you call them. They don't care if you call them capitalist, communist, whatever, but they are trying to take down American values. They are trying to take down the American people. They're trying to take all the money, share it with other countries, and bring down the living standard of America. It's very scary. That may be a subject for a future documentary for us. I really like using China as an example, because if people say they want socialism, go live in China. Go there and try and do your free speech. Go there and try and have a peaceful demonstration. You're in prison. You do this something on the street, you are shot dead, and your whole family is going to be isolated from society. Your friends, your family, your kids will not be able to go to school. They will be absolutely publicly humiliated. That's a socialist country. That's big government. So I'm sorry, that's my rant on that. I'm very passionate about what's going on right now because it's very scary, and people are, good people are being hurt, and this confusion over all of these isms out there is something that I really hope people can look into and get clear on, because it's not socialism versus capitalism or anything like that. That's just what they're using as a front. But ultimately, we need humanity. We need humanity.
And there's a lot of humanity in finding courage, and I appreciate you and Swoop Films sharing the movie with me. I hope that the moment you are able to get some kind of a distribution or festivals or wider release, that you let me know, so I can repost this interview, or maybe we can talk again or something, because I think it's important that people see it, not only because it's an important message, but it's also a great film, a very moving one about people who have experienced horrors that are unimaginable, but have come out with an optimism and dreams and things that I think most people nowadays, if they experienced an eighth of what Leo went through, would have just crumbled. So yeah, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Ian. Thank you.